What's your true supernatural, unexplainable, or downright creepy story? When I was like 14 or 15, my family lived in a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. At the very end of the street, though, there was this tiny abandoned house that had been empty forever. All the local kids liked to sneak into it at night to prove they were brave, but I was never that kind of kid. One night, I had 3 friends over, and my super cute neighbor suggested we go check out the abandoned house. I regret it now, but at the time, I didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I went along. It was around 2 in the morning when we snuck out. We had our phone flashlights and one actual flashlight. The grass around the house was so tall that crouching made us practically invisible, and all the visible windows and doors were boarded up. After a few careful loops around the place, we found 2 basement windows that weren't boarded. One looked like it had never been covered, hidden by the tall grass, and the other looked like someone had taken the boards off on purpose. My neighbor and I looked into the first one, and the others checked the second. We started talking about which one would be safest to enter, while I kept shining my flashlight around the basement. From where I was standing, the stairs looked weird. They weren't just a straight shot. They went up halfway, hit a landing, then turned sharply and continued up. I was shining my flashlight over them, and I could have sworn I saw something move out of the corner of the basement. My heart jumped, and I immediately said we shouldn't go in, especially not the basement. The guys laughed at me, of course, and with a girl there, I caved and agreed to go in, but I made it clear we were staying away from the basement. We went around the house again and found the back door wasn't boarded up as securely as the others. With some effort, we pried it open and stepped inside. The place was bare, no drywall, no insulation, just exterior boards and exposed studs. We explored the first floor, and the only thing that caught anyone's attention was an old fridge. Everyone wanted to open it except me. Of course, they did eventually, and it was empty. I felt a huge wave of relief. We were about to leave when the bravest one decided to head down to the basement. I spent at least 5 minutes trying to talk him out of it. No luck. He started down the stairs, shining his light onto the landing below, and then, out of nowhere, this chilling, almost maniacal laugh came from the basement. Everyone totally freaked out. The girl screamed, I screamed, and the guys were screaming too. Just pure terror. The bravest guy dropped his phone at the top of the stairs, and it bounced all the way down to the landing. When we shined our flashlight on it, we saw the battery had popped out, and the backplate was sitting just 1 step above the landing, like it was mocking us. No one was willing to go down for it, so we decided to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. We bolted, adrenaline pumping, and ran all the way home in terrified silence. Hearts were racing, and nobody really knew what to do next. After a quick discussion, we agreed to come back during the day to grab his phone safely. We barely slept that night, restless, jumpy, still spooked. The next day, we came back around 2 in the afternoon, this time with my older brother for backup. We stepped into the house cautiously, checked out the empty fridge again, and carefully made our way to the basement stairs. And that's when things got weird. First, my brother vanished from view, and second, the phone was completely gone. Then this awful rotting smell hit us, so strong it was hard to breathe, and a wave of dread just washed over all of us. We hear my brother shout, "Shit!" and we sprint over to him, half terrified, half confused. He had opened the fridge, and inside was a cat, dead for what looked like at least a week, crawling with maggots, reeking like you wouldn't believe, and just utterly disgusting. The smell filled the entire room and made everyone nauseous. And then, on the top shelf, right above the decaying cat, was my friend's phone, like someone had placed it there on purpose. We grabbed it as fast as we could and got the hell out of there. We never went back after that. It wasn't really supernatural, not exactly a ghost, but the fear we felt was completely real. I still can't explain how we didn't notice or smell the cat at first. That uncertainty, combined with the shock, makes it easily the scariest thing I've ever experienced. Even now, thinking back on that night gives me chills. Story 2. Sharing a few experiences from both houses, starting with the most recent. We moved in knowing that the previous owners, a husband and wife, had died in the house, years apart. Honestly, it didn't bother us at all, and we weren't expecting anything weird. It wasn't until about 4 months later that anything unusual happened, and aside from one recording, which I'll get to, it was mostly harmless stuff. The house was only about 1,200 square feet, with a basement that stayed locked and even barred, so we never went down there. At the time, we had 4 dogs who barked at pretty much anything, 3 barks for anyone they recognized, and a non-stop barking fit for strangers, so any odd noise was immediately noticeable. The back door was original from around 1910 with a skeleton key lock. We only had 1 key, so we kept it in the lock all the time because we were scared of losing it. The door didn't close properly either. I had to brace my knee against it and push with all my strength to get the lock to engage. And every morning, we'd wake up to find it unlocked and wide open, which was unsettling. One evening, my husband and I came home unusually late from work. We had to rush the dogs outside before any accidents happened, and the house felt way too quiet. It gave us both a bit of an uneasy feeling. We split up to take the dogs out. I took the oldest one out the front, and my husband took the 2 chihuahuas out the back. When I came back inside, I heard the skeleton key lock click and just assumed he'd already come back in. A second later, though, he walked in through the back door with the dogs and asked why I'd locked him out. I hadn't. After that, we started leaving the key on a shelf instead of in the lock, and weirdly enough, the door thing never happened again. That alone gave us a little peace of mind in a house that was starting to feel aware. From the couch, you could look right through the dining room and down a short hallway. The bathroom was off to the left, out of direct view, but if the light was on, it lit up the whole hall and part of the dining room. That light would turn itself on and off, sometimes over and over. We had the wiring checked before buying the house, and again about a year later. Nothing wrong. Eventually, we started yelling, "Turn the light off, please." And no joke, it would turn off. It was creepy, but also weirdly funny. All of us, me, my husband, and overnight guests like my son and daughter, would sometimes feel like we were being poked while sleeping. It was unsettling, but it honestly felt more like a kid trying to get attention than anything threatening. That same poking sensation happened in the basement too. One time I went down there and saw my husband working with headphones on, his back to me. I tapped his shoulder. No response. Tapped again. Nothing. The third time, he spun around with his fist halfway up, completely startled, and said, "Whatever it is down here has been poking me for the last hour." We also heard what sounded like hammering in the basement, and at night, we'd hear someone run up the basement stairs to the door, stop, then slowly walk back down. No one was ever there, and there wasn't even an outside entrance to the basement. The most blatant thing that ever happened was the one time I'm pretty sure I actually saw her, the woman who used to live there. One of my coworkers and I used to carpool to save gas, and this was my day to drive. She lived just down the road and would come to my house. It was December, middle of winter, and I'd started my car to let it warm up. I went back inside to do one last check. Animals were fine. Doors locked. Lights off. Everything normal. I ended up in the laundry room. It was still dark in there, with the floodlight outside on for my coworker and the door open, so I was looking out through the storm door. The overhead light was on too, and I realized I couldn't really see outside because of the glare. I stepped forward and shut the light off, and in the reflection behind me, there was a woman. I'm about 5'3", and she looked closer to 5'8", slightly stocky, hair curled away from her face, wearing what looked like a light-colored housecoat, maybe blue. Her face was shadowed, like I couldn't make out any features. She didn't move at all in the few seconds it took my brain to catch up. I turned around, and she was just gone. My husband and I spent a long time trying to recreate any reflection or shadow that could explain it, but the door only reflected a plain wall behind me. There was literally nothing there that could have caused what I saw. It messed with both of us for the rest of the day, and honestly, it still does when I think about it. Story 3. I used to live in a small, kind of cramped house with my mom and brother. There was only one bathroom, and getting to it from my room meant walking through basically the entire house, out through the living room, past the bedrooms, through the kitchen, into the laundry room, and finally the bathroom. It was the only room with an actual door. The house was old, and the bedroom doorways were weirdly wide, way wider than normal. Most of the house was carpeted, but the kitchen, laundry room, and bathroom had linoleum floors that creaked and echoed in a really unsettling way. One night, I had to pee in the middle of the night. Even as a teenager, I was still scared of the dark, so I moved slowly, checking every room as I went. I couldn't turn on many of the lights because of how the house was laid out, so I was relying on the little bits of light I could use and just watching everything carefully. My mom and brother were both asleep, so it was completely quiet, and I felt very alone walking through the carpeted hallway. I finally made it to the bathroom and felt a lot better once I could turn on the lights in the laundry room and bathroom. I was just starting to relax when I heard it. Bare feet, slowly moving across the linoleum floor in the kitchen. The sound was unmistakable. I'd made the same noise myself walking in there, but this was different. Slow, careful, deliberate, like someone was trying not to be heard. My heart immediately started pounding because I knew I'd have to walk past that area to get back to my room. I froze on the toilet, too scared to scream or even breathe. I just sat there listening, counting the steps in my head. There were maybe 8 or 10 of them, slow and measured, and then it just stopped. After what felt like forever, I worked up the nerve to pull my pajama pants up and head back toward my room. I checked every space as I passed through, but nothing was disturbed, and my mom and brother were still asleep exactly where they'd been before. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed for the rest of the night. I don't really believe in the supernatural. I'm pretty rational and assume there's an explanation for everything, even if I don't know what it is yet. But that night genuinely freaked me out. There was no one else in the house, and nothing else could have made that sound. Even now, typing this out still makes me uneasy. For anyone who's into the supernatural, there's another weird thing that happened in that same house back when my aunt moved in for a few months. Before she got there, every morning without fail, tiny little pieces of some kind of grain would show up in the same spot on the kitchen counter. It only happened overnight while we were asleep, and we had no idea how it got there. At first, my mom just wiped it away every morning without thinking much of it. Eventually, she noticed a pattern. If she didn't wipe the counter for a couple of days, no more grains showed up. Maybe a little would appear on the 2nd or 3rd day, but it never piled up unless the counter had been cleaned. We looked for mice or any other pests, but found absolutely nothing. Nothing about it made any sense. Then my aunt moved in. She brought in Ouija board, and I decided to play along, curious but skeptical. She and I put our hands on the planchette, trying to communicate with the spirit supposedly haunting the house, a woman named Vivian. My mom asked Vivian if she was the one leaving the grains. The planchette slowly moved to yes. Then my mom asked why, and the answer came, food for you. Mom just said, thanks, but we really don't need it. After that, the grains stopped completely. All the strange nightly stuff in the house seemed to vanish too. At that point in my life, I was still really scared of the dark, and my more rational mindset hadn't fully kicked in yet. I didn't want to believe in ghosts, but between the footsteps and the weird grain thing, I was genuinely creeped out. My mom has always believed in that stuff and thought it was kind of cool to have a friendly ghost around. I did not feel that way at all. One night, after I was convinced I heard Vivian's footsteps in the kitchen again, I finally snapped and said really loudly, Vivian, I do not want to see or hear you again. And honestly, that was it. I never saw or heard anything scary after that. When we eventually moved, my mom even joked about inviting Vivian to come with us. I completely lost it and refused. Absolutely not. Friendly or not. If ghosts are real, I don't want them anywhere near me. Between the unexplained noises, the mystery grains, and the whole idea of a playful spirit hanging around, it stuck with me. Even now, thinking about it still makes me uneasy. Story 4. My grandparents' house has had weird poltergeist stuff going on since around 1970. Apparently, it all started when my mom and her 2 sisters, Louise and Teresa, were kids and thought it was a good idea to mess around in a cemetery. Yeah, I know. They were playing hide and seek, and my mom forgot the very basic rule of don't step on actual graves. She ran right over one. The ground collapsed, and she fell straight into it. She later said the grave was from 1907 and had her exact name on it, which already feels like a bad omen. Instead of taking that as a sign to stop, they scooped up some of the dirt and brought it home. They had a Ouija board, and since Jimi Hendrix had just died, Louise wanted to try contacting him. Their genius plan was to boost the board by sprinkling grave dirt around it, lighting candles, and turning off all the lights. No Jimi Hendrix, obviously, but something named Amy answered instead. First thing it did was scold them for being naughty girls. Then the planchette immediately moved to goodbye. They said the room went dead silent. Then the wind outside picked up and sounded like a woman screaming and a man moaning at the same time. There was no wind inside, but all the candles blew out at once, and the bedside lamp turned itself on. They ran screaming into their dad's room and hid, wedged between the wall and the bed. After they calmed down, they decided they needed to get rid of everything. They went back to Louise's room, brushed the dirt into a linen handkerchief, grabbed the Ouija board, then went to the kitchen for salt and matches. Outside, they held hands, said the Lord's Prayer, sprinkled salt on the board and dirt, poured gasoline on it all, and set it on fire. They went back inside thinking that was the end of it and tried not to think about it anymore. Nothing happened for a few weeks until the youngest, Louise, started having night terrors. She'd wake up screaming multiple times a night. Then my mom started doing the same. Then Teresa. My grandparents weren't dramatic people and didn't exaggerate stuff, but they described those months as total chaos. No one slept. They'd be running from room to room all night, turning lights on and off, calming one kid down just to have another start screaming minutes later. This went on for months, then suddenly stopped. Right when my grandparents finally started sleeping again, Louise began screaming for them in the middle of the night. "There are people in my room." She said she'd wake up hearing voices. When she opened her eyes, the lights would be on, and there'd be a man and a woman standing in the corner, casually sipping cocktails and talking about the weather. My grandmother started sleeping in Louise's bed. She was about 16 at this point. The first few nights were quiet. Then one night, Louise shook her awake. My grandmother opened her eyes, saw nothing, heard nothing, and asked what was wrong. Louise grabbed her nightgown, whispered shh, and the bedside lamp turned on by itself. That was it. My grandmother jumped out of bed, yanked Louise up, and dragged her straight into my grandfather's room. She woke him up, explained everything, and all three of them slept there for weeks. Eventually, Teresa moved out for college, and they moved Louise into her old room. Weird stuff still happened after that, but it slowed way down. More once in a while than constant. Now, 47 years later, that bedroom is basically a time capsule. My grandmother cleaned it weekly for decades, but nothing was ever changed except Louise's, clothes being removed. Every other room in the house got renovated over the years. That room still has pea green shag carpet and orange and gold owl wallpaper. My grandmother passed away 10 years ago, and no one really uses the room anymore except when guests stay over. Almost every time, the guest ends up sleeping on the couch instead. When the room is empty at night, you can hear people talking, lots of them, like a small party is going on. As a kid, that room gave me endless nightmares. All the older cousins loved messing with the younger kids. One of their favorite games was shoving us into that room and locking us in. I got locked in the closet when I was 7. Different story, but same room. Eventually, the crying would bring an adult running, or we'd get the usual threat. "You're too little to play with us. Sit alone in the back bedroom for 5 minutes if you want to join." Over the years, weird stuff happened all over the house. I won't list everything because this is already long, but honestly, everyone kinda got used to it. For the last 35 years or so, that room has basically belonged to them, whatever it is that never left. The one thing that still sticks with me happened when an older cousin shut me in the closet in that room. I say locked, but she just closed the door. I don't remember why I couldn't open it. I just remember trying over and over and not being able to. I didn't want to scream. 1, I didn't want to look like a chicken and risk her not playing with me anymore. 2, if she got in trouble, playtime would be over. So I sat on the closet floor with my back against the wall, holding my breath. At first, it was quiet. Then I heard footsteps right outside the door. I thought she was finally coming back. She wasn't. Apparently, she'd gone outside to ride her bike. Then things got worse. The wire hangers started scraping back and forth on the rod by themselves, like someone was pushing them. An old doll fell off the top shelf and landed right in front of me. One of those dolls with a voice box. I stared straight into its plastic face and it said, "Mama." I absolutely lost it, screaming, pounding on the door. My grandfather came running down the hall and threw it open. I was terrified. My cousin, maybe less so, especially since that night my grandfather made her sleep alone in that room as punishment. She's held that against me ever since. So yeah, my mom and her sisters messed with grave dirt and a Ouija board and supposedly summoned something named Amy. And 47 years later, whatever Amy is, she still hasn't left. Story 5. My parents bought their house just after I was born, a little over 20 years ago, and they still live there. To give you an idea of how long this has been going on, the activity has been consistent the entire time. Not vague or questionable, very obvious stuff. And unlike most ghost stories, we actually got some answers from the elderly neighbor next door. She told us the ghost's name was Fred. Apparently he died after accidentally suffocating while working on his car in the garage with the doors closed. He left behind a wife and 2 daughters, and they moved out not long after he passed. That's when my parents bought the house and raised me there. I've had the most experiences by far. My mom has had a few. My dad has only one. So I'll start with his. I've always thought that because I was so young, Fred maybe saw me as one of his daughters. That might also explain why my younger brother has never experienced anything at all. Fred never felt threatening or malicious. If anything, he's what my family calls a trickster ghost. Grab some popcorn or a hot drink, because there's a lot. Dad's story. When I was still a baby in my crib, my dad came into my room to check on me and suddenly felt a cold rush of air across his face and hair, like someone had blown on him or rushed past. I was asleep and the window was closed. He tried to recreate it afterward, walking around, waving his arms, opening and closing doors, but nothing came close to what he felt. Mom's stories. For her first Mother's Day, my dad, mostly my dad, since I was just a few months old, got my mom a heart-shaped pendant on a chain. She loved it and wore it constantly, showering, sleeping, cooking, everything. Eventually, she had to stop wearing it because she kept waking up with the heart completely detached from the chain, but the chain was still clasped around her neck. Sometimes the pendant would be on her chest, sometimes next to her pillow, sometimes sitting on the nightstand. She took it to multiple jewelers, thinking it had to be defective. Every one of them said the same thing. The chain was fine, the clasp was secure, and there was no way the pendant could come off without the chain being undone first. Fast forward a few years. I'm in kindergarten or first grade. My mom worked from home and was watching TV while she worked. She realizes it's time to pick me up from school, turns off the TV and stereo, and starts heading upstairs. Halfway up, both turn back on. She goes back down, turns them off again, and heads upstairs. Same thing, everything turns back on. At this point, she's annoyed, not scared. She goes back down a third time, shuts everything off, and says, "Quit it, Fred. I'm going to be late picking Em up." Everything stayed off after that. She's also had random kitchen stuff just vanish over the years. Baking tins, and even a massive turkey roaster. We've torn the house apart more than once, from the attic to under the basement stairs, and none of it has ever turned up. My stories. I was probably 10 or 12 when this happened. I stayed home sick from school and was laying on the couch watching a movie in the upstairs living room. The couch faced the TV and a hallway that led to the bathroom, my room, and my parents' room. Mom was in the shower. Dad was at work. There's no way he could have been home that early, and I would have heard his truck. My brother was at school. I was just hanging out with my dog when I saw a shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye, about my dad's height and build, maybe a little bulkier. It was standing at the end of the couch, partly hidden where the hallway starts. I honestly thought it was my dad and said something like, "You're home early," or commented on the movie. I turned my head to actually look, and it was gone. Another time, I was getting ready for karate after school, standing at my desk mirror doing my hair. Out of nowhere, I felt a hand on my shoulder, firm, but not scary. Not aggressive at all, more like a dad or grandpa kind of touch. It actually felt weirdly comforting. This one's probably my favorite. I was looking for a chain for a charm I had with my name engraved on it. I asked my mom, and she said she didn't know where it was, but jokingly told me to ask Fred, since he liked taking things. Later, I was in my room, standing at the foot of my bed, watching TV during a commercial, and I said out loud, "Fred, if you have my chain, I'd really like it back." A few minutes later, a tin I kept hairbrushes and random stuff in, sitting on a bookshelf on the opposite side of my room, suddenly tipped over. It scared the hell out of me. I went to check it out and found 2 chains tangled together, sitting right on top of the mess that had spilled out. I just stared at it for a second, said thank you, and ran to show my mom. And just recently, my brother and I were in the living room around 11 p.m. when music started blasting down the hallway. We thought my dad had the TV turned way up while trying to sleep. After a few minutes, it was still going, so I had a sudden oh shit moment and realized it might be my radio. It was. My bedroom door was closed, and that radio only turns on if you physically press the buttons. Story 6. Over the years, I've lived in 2 houses that were almost certainly haunted. The The one that freaked me out the most was just a few years ago. I'd grown up in a house known for weird activity, so ghosts never really scared me. After all, they're just people, right? That house had a long history of strange stuff. Lights would turn on and off by themselves. You'd hear footsteps and voices, even though it was way out in the country with no neighbors around. The basement would bang for no reason, and the weirdest part was this poking feeling, sometimes at night while sleeping, sometimes when wandering the basement. None of it ever felt truly threatening, so it was easy to shrug off as just weird. At some point, I got curious about trying to actually communicate with whatever was there. I grabbed a digital voice recorder, couldn't afford a camera, and left it running overnight, hoping to catch something interesting. A couple of details are important for this story. First, the house started as just a single room, and over the years, they kept adding on a kitchen, bedroom, full bathroom, laundry room, and later another addition with a second bedroom, half bath, and a new kitchen. The old kitchen became a formal dining room. It was all built kind of haphazardly, so sound didn't carry well from one end of the house to the other. Second, there was this alarm clock with a built-in spa sound machine, always set to the rain feature. My hearing was a little off, so the rain sound was always cranked up as loud as possible. That night, the old dog was tucked into her kennel, and the recorder was set up between the dining room and laundry room, as far from the bedroom as possible. The two younger dogs and the cat went into the bedroom, and everyone went to bed. The next day, I played back the recording, hoping to catch something interesting. It took a couple of days to go through the whole thing. The recording starts with loud clattering as it's set on the table. You can hear footsteps walking away, then a voice saying to the dog, "Good night, Bonita." More footsteps, some muted conversation between the couple, and then the rain machine kicking in, sounding like a gentle waterfall. A few seconds later, it turns into a muted roar when the bedroom door shuts. The timestamp shows about 10:15 p.m. After that, it's mostly silence, just the faint rain, until around 2 a.m. That's when the old dog's nails click on the hard floor of her kennel, with scratching, whimpering, and panting that goes on for about 5 minutes. The whimpering gets more frantic, the panting almost panicked, and then it stops. After a short pause, a small bark comes through, the familiar, "Hey, you're up, let me out," bark. The timestamp shows 2:18 a.m. Then a stage whisper, terrifyingly close to the recorder, calls, "Bonita." The dog yelps and screams, almost drowning out a giggle. The giggle sounds like the same voice that whispered her name, but it's definitely not mine. When the husband comes home, I play the recording for him. "So you fussed at the dog?" he asks. "No, the dog wasn't disturbed by me," I reply. "Okay, well, you sleepwalk. That's all it was." "No, listen from the beginning. The bedroom door never opens." He takes the recorder to the basement to listen. Bonita's name is whispered and shouted multiple times, with the giggling continuing. After about 20 minutes, it all stops, and the dog eventually quiets down, presumably going back to sleep. Going back over the tape, the rain machine never changes volume until 6 a.m., meaning the bedroom door never opened. Whatever happened on the recording wasn't me. It was an imitation. The recorder was tossed immediately. I never wanted to hear it again. It freaked me out more than anything else that had happened in the house. We never tried recording anything again, and the incident was treated like it never happened. Nothing else like it ever occurred. Bonita slept in the kennel because of unsafe behaviors, like chewing cords, even though she was 13 at the time. She had to be separated from other pets after becoming aggressive following the sudden loss of a playmate. After the tape incident, she did sleep in the bedroom with us, still in her kennel. She's now 17, healthy, but showing early signs of dementia. We moved out of the house less than 3 months later. Bonus detail, Bonita has pica, meaning she sometimes eats non-food objects. She was notorious for knocking polyresin and porcelain figurines off shelves just to break and eat them. Story 7. This happened sometime in 2011 on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was playing Perfect World online with friends and killing time before the weekend ended. I'm terrible with dates, so bear with me. I started getting a mild headache and figured it would pass, so I didn't bother taking anything. It didn't pass. The headache kept getting worse, and along with it came this really unsettling feeling I couldn't explain. I tried to ignore it and kept playing, but eventually it got bad enough that I took some meds and went to bed. Luckily, there was no school the next day because what happened stuck with me for years. My family, especially on my dad's side, has always had intense paranormal stuff going on. Not just creepy house noises, but really extreme, almost alien-feeling things. I was used to it by then. When I lived with my dad and youngest sister, the activity ramped up a lot. Chairs would move on their own. Vases would randomly explode. Footsteps echoed in empty halls. And there were constant weird sounds. Clapping, clicking, murmuring. Sometimes I'd see small, shadowy figures dart across rooms, usually after nights where I barely slept. I'd wake up every morning, dehydrated, weak, and just off. Like whatever happened overnight drained me physically. One night, I went to bed with the worst headache I'd ever had as a young teen. It felt like someone was crushing my temples, like my eye sockets were going to crack. I couldn't sleep. I kept getting waves of heat and cold, and this creeping panic set in. Then suddenly, I couldn't move at all, completely paralyzed, terrified. I forced myself to move my head just enough to look up, and there was a tall man standing there, wearing a suit. That image is burned into my memory. The man looked pale and almost dead, with really sharp features. High cheekbones, deep-set eyes, and skin that looked waxy, like a mannequin. He was completely bald, no eyebrows at all. I remember consciously trying to memorize every detail because everything looked too clear. He was wearing a black-brimmed hat, gloves, sunglasses with straps, and carrying a briefcase. He stood right next to my bed, leaning slightly over me, staring down through the glasses. What was weird is that the sickness vanished instantly. The headache, the nausea, gone. It felt directly connected to him. I couldn't look away. Like eye contact wasn't optional. Talking was impossible. I couldn't force words out, but somehow it didn't matter because it felt like he already knew what I was thinking and was responding to it anyway. Calm, controlled, authoritative. At one point, he said, or communicated, "We made you this way to contact you." His lips never moved. The only way I can describe it is telepathy. I wasn't speaking, but he answered thoughts and emotions as if they were spoken out loud. He told me that everything I'd experienced up to that point was real, not imagined, not dreams, real. He mentioned aliens, but it was vague and hard to grasp. The only thing that came through clearly was that their existence, as people understand it, is genuine. Even now, the memory is confusing, and I'm still not sure I fully understand what he meant. One thing he said has always stuck with me. "We've been watching your family for a while. We know your father knows, and that you know. You're becoming aware, and we'll be watching over you from now on." When he said that, it felt like some kind of bond was formed. Not in a dramatic way, just this deep sense that something permanent had been set in motion, like an unspoken agreement. It felt protective, but also authoritative, comforting and unsettling at the same time. There was more conversation after that, though most of it's blurry now. He asked questions about school, my behavior, things I liked. As strange as it sounds, answering felt normal, familiar even. Eventually, he told me to close my eyes, and I did without hesitation. Trust felt automatic, like it had already been earned. The next morning, I woke up and saw a feminine silhouette standing at the foot of my bed. I moved slowly, testing whether I could actually move this time. As it came closer, fear snapped back in hard, like I'd just come out of a trance. I kicked the covers off and noticed the sheets were way neater than I remembered, like someone had tucked me in. Just as I was about to scream, the figure faded out. It left me shaken, but also weirdly relieved. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I tried to draw what I'd seen, but that sketch is long gone now. Story 8. A few months ago, something really weird happened to me on a walk with my mom. We were on this familiar trail around a hill we've walked 100 times, usually with the dogs. The drive there was normal, and we started the short loop at the top of the hill, like always. People have gone missing on that trail before, but we'd never had any problems ourselves. Anyway, we kept walking, and at some point, I noticed something off. The sun was in the exact same spot it had been when we started, on a looped path. It should have moved as we went around, right? The ground stayed flat too, when it should have been sloping down at the descent. I realized I had no memory of a chunk of the walk, like time just disappeared. The whole thing was quiet and eerie, and even now, it sticks with me. I pulled my phone out to check the time. It was 2:37, no signal, which was strange because reception up there is usually fine. We'd started the walk at 11, and that's when I really started to freak out. The whole walk, from the car, around the loop, and back. normally takes maybe an hour and a half. The sun should have been almost overhead, but instead it was sitting low in the sky, exactly where it would be around 3 that time of year. I turned to ask my mom what time she had. She didn't respond. She was staring off to her left, straight through me like I wasn't there at all. Completely blank expression. I called her name. Nothing. I touched her shoulder. Still nothing. This went on for about 3 minutes. I backed away after about a minute because her stare was freaking me out so badly. I ended up sitting on a log just off the path, heart pounding, feeling sick. I was 20 years old and still panicking like a little kid. At 2:40, she suddenly snapped out of it. She looked around slowly and then said in this really hollow, flat voice, "I think the fairies might have us. We need to keep walking." That made everything worse. My mom has never met fairies in a cute storybook way. I grew up hearing about them as something dark, things that confuse you, trick you, and lead you astray. So hearing her say that right then made my stomach drop. We kept walking, but the path didn't even feel familiar anymore, and I had this overwhelming feeling that we were being watched the whole time. I asked her, "What time does your watch say?" She always wore one of those battery-powered analog watches. She checked it and said, 2:45. Then she checked it again and frowned. "That's not right, is it?" I just shook my head. I couldn't even explain why it felt wrong. It just was. She took a breath and said, "All right, keep walking." So we did, and it just didn't end. The path didn't curve, didn't go up or down, and the woods never changed. It felt like we were stuck in the same stretch forever. What should have been maybe 30 minutes felt way longer. Even my mom, who normally isn't afraid of anything, started looking uneasy. You could tell she was forcing herself to stay calm. At one point, she stopped, squared her shoulders, and said out loud, "Who's toying with us? Put us back." Right after that, we heard this deep laugh behind us. Not close enough to pinpoint, not far enough to ignore. It echoed through the trees. We both spun around, but there was nothing there. No one. That's when it really hit me that something wasn't right. It felt like time itself was broken, like reality was bent around us. Eventually, we hit the top of the hill and came to the fork that leads back to the gate. It was familiar, but I couldn't remember actually choosing a path, which was strange because every other time we'd walked it, that part was always deliberate. We just went. We walked downhill, trying to stay calm, and finally came out of the woods to where the car was parked by the old church and cemetery. The time on the dash said 5:12. By any normal logic, we should have been back by around 12:45. Even if you go by the weird time jump, where our watches and phone were nearing 3, it still didn't make sense. Almost 5 hours were just gone. No explanation. Out of all the strange stuff I've experienced, this one messes with me the most. It was daytime, on a trail I knew well, somewhere that should have felt safe. I still don't know where that time went, or what path we actually walked. I went back alone later to see if anything felt off, but it was completely normal, just a regular trail. I've had other weird experiences too, but none of them needed this much detail. This one still doesn't sit right. Story 9. There are 3 experiences that have always stuck with me. They're weird, and I can't explain them, but I remember them clearly enough that I've never been able to brush them off. The first one happened when I was about 7 or 8. It was one of the first times I was allowed to stay home alone. The house we lived in had a really strange layout because there was a huge addition built onto the back, about the same size as the original house. You'd come in through the back door, and there wasn't an actual door separating it from the rest of the house. Right behind that opening were the basement stairs, and to the left was a step up into the kitchen, which had those old tube fluorescent lights. The basement stairs were insanely loud. You could hear every single step. I usually hung out in the addition because that's where the TV and computer were. It was a massive, open room, around 700 square feet, and the couch and TV were all the way at the far end, away from the entryway. I was sitting there watching TV, probably around 8 at night, and it was just starting to get dark. All of a sudden, I heard this really loud pounding, like someone was running or stomping up the basement stairs as fast as they could. It was aggressive and unmistakable, and it scared the hell out of me. The basement door was wide open, but there was nothing there. Then the kitchen lights started flickering on and off by themselves. Right after that, I heard more stomping, this time moving through the living room toward the front door, and then everything just went silent. I never actually saw anything, but as a little kid home alone for one of the first times, I was completely freaked out. I ended up calling my mom and asking her to come home early. That was the only really strange thing that ever happened in that house. The second experience was in the house where I spent most of my teenage years. That place was pretty well known among my family as being haunted, but nothing ever felt evil. It was more like the feeling of being watched, random touches, or hearing things move when no one was around. Once, the drum set even started playing on its own around 2 in the morning, which was terrifying at the time. My bedroom was at the very back of the house, with stairs in the corner leading up to the attic. The stairs were cheap, unfinished wood with open backs, so you could see straight through them. My bed was positioned directly across from the stairs. One night, I woke up suddenly for no reason and was instantly wide awake. That heavy feeling of being watched hit me immediately. Through the gaps in the stairs, I briefly saw what looked like 2 reflective eyes, like when a cat catches the light. Then I heard slow, deliberate footsteps going up the stairs. I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. To this day, that's one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. After that, I switched rooms with my mom. The last one isn't really paranormal, but it's still one of the most unsettling things I've ever experienced, and I still can't explain it. During my senior year of high school, I worked as a pizza delivery driver through a work program that let me leave school at 11 in the morning. I worked late nights and then went to school afterward, so my schedule was already kind of messed up. One night around 1 a.m., I got an order to deliver to a hospital. That wasn't unusual. Hospitals were one of the few places ordering food that late. The problem was the order didn't list a department or wing, just a doctor's name. I walked around asking people, but no one had ever heard of the doctor on the ticket. The hospital wasn't even that big, but I somehow got completely turned around. Eventually, I found an elevator that took me to a really dark hallway. There was a faint light at the far end, so I walked toward it, figuring I'd find someone there. When I reached it, there was no one, just more dark corridors branching off. When I turned around to leave, I couldn't find the elevator anymore. That's when I started to panic. I wandered through nearly pitch black hallways for what felt like forever, checking doors and hoping to find anyone. It ended up being almost 2 hours before I finally found an emergency exit and got out. I didn't make it back to the store until around 4 a.m. I told them I would never deliver to that hospital again. What's weird is that we never got another order from there after that. Nothing paranormal, but being alone, lost in the dark for 2 hours with no sign of another person was absolutely terrifying. It still sticks with me. Story 10. Growing up with 3 siblings meant space was tight, and I was the only one without a bed for a long time, so I slept on the couch for a big part of my childhood. One night in particular has always stuck with me. Normally, my dad would go to bed while I was still up on the computer, getting ready for work like usual. He always told me who was home before turning in. That night, he said one of my sisters was still in her room. I told him goodnight, said love you, and went back to what I was doing, assuming everything was normal. I already knew my other sister was at a friend's place and my brother was camping. Dad told me all of this around 9:30 p.m. I stayed on my computer until about 3:30 in the morning. When I finally shut it down, the house was completely dark, like you'd expect at that hour. I turned the TV on and laid down on the couch. From the couch, if you look to the right, you can see straight down the hallway. I could see light coming from under my sister's bedroom door and through the cracks, which made sense since Dad said she was home. I got up to grab my pillow and blanket, which I kept in her room to keep the living room neat. As I walked down the hall and reached for her doorknob, the light in her room suddenly shut off, just instantly dark. I hadn't ever experienced anything weird before, so I tried not to think much of it. I opened the door and immediately got hit with a blast of freezing cold air. One of her windows was wide open. That's when it hit me. She must have snuck out with friends. The light in her room wouldn't turn back on. The bulb had burned out, so I used my phone flashlight to grab my pillow and blanket from the closet. My arms were full, and my plan was to take everything back to the couch and then come back to shut her door. I didn't even make it halfway down the hallway. Her bedroom door slammed shut behind me, hard. I jumped and spun around, but everything was dead silent. The TV I'd left on in the living room was off. The house felt suddenly cold and completely still. I panicked. I dropped to the floor right there in the hallway, wrapped myself in my blanket, and started screaming for my dad until he woke up. He came out annoyed and exhausted, turning on 3 lights as he walked. In a half-asleep, pissed-off voice, he told me to get your buns to frigging bed. I ran back to the couch, buried my face in my pillow, and cried while listening to him slam his bedroom door. He left all the lights on behind him, probably out of sheer frustration, which honestly makes sense at 4 in the morning. When I finally lifted my head, the lights were so bright they hurt my eyes. I shoved my face back into the pillow to rub them, since my hands were tucked underneath and I didn't feel like moving. When I lifted my head again, the living room was completely dark and silent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Later, I found out that what felt like maybe 5 seconds of rubbing my eyes was actually around 45 minutes of drifting off. The lights were off because my mom had gotten up and turned them off while making coffee for my dad before work. That part makes sense, but the mystery of the door slamming and the TV turning off remains unsolved. Story 11. I was out riding alone, which wasn't unusual since I've been riding forever, when a pheasant spooked my horse. It happened fast, and before I could correct myself, I got thrown straight into and over a dry stone wall. I hit my head and blacked out, at least for a bit. When I came to, I tried to move. My horse was loose, and that alone sent me into panic mode. If he bolted, I was about 10 miles from home with no real way back except walking. That's when things got weird. I heard a man's voice say, "Don't move yet. I've got him, and I've got you too. You're safe. I'm here." I was completely alone. Whoever spoke knew my name. Even though the voice sounded calm, I tried to move anyway, which was a mistake. My nose immediately started bleeding, and I passed out again. When I woke up, I was back on the correct side of the wall. My phone was smashed beyond saving on the ground next to me. My horse was calmly tied to the wall by his reins, and his saddle was placed neatly on the ground nearby. My head was pounding, but I didn't have much choice. I had to tack up and get home. I kept telling myself I must have imagined the voice and somehow done all of that myself. Climbed the wall, tied the horse, sorted everything out while concussed. As I mounted, affectionately known as the idiot beast, I got this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I turned him in every direction, scanning the field, but there was absolutely no one there. I was completely alone in the middle of nowhere, yet that feeling wouldn't go away. So I rode home, 10 miles in about 35 minutes, which was rough considering I was injured, and he'd just dumped me. Weirdly, he was incredibly careful the whole way, like he knew something was wrong. I've had him since he was a foal, and I know when he's genuinely unsettled, and he definitely was that day. The whole ride home was deeply unnerving. I kept feeling like something was following me, which made no sense. Unless someone had a vehicle or another horse, there was no way anyone could keep up. I know those woods and heath like the back of my hand, every shortcut, every wall and fence, and there just isn't a route someone could take without being seen. I still took a few shortcuts anyway, jumping fences and walls and probably annoying a farmer or two, but it put a bit of distance between me and whatever I was panicking about. Weirdly, despite the fear, most of the ride I felt protected. That calm, reassuring voice from earlier kept replaying in my head. I kept telling myself it had to be imagined. When my house finally came into view, I slowed the idiot beast down and walked him along the road to cool off. I was listening to the steady sound of his hooves on the tarmac when I suddenly heard something else, someone running. Real human footsteps, sharp and deliberate, like hard shoes hitting pavement. The running slowed to a walk, and my horse immediately got nervous, skittering like he could sense someone right behind us. My heart jumped, and I started to turn in the saddle when a calm voice spoke right behind me. "Don't turn around. You're home safe now. I've already done. No matter. I cleaned your face up, but that cut on your head is nasty. You should get it checked." I snapped the horse around and looked, but there was no one there. No one could have vanished that fast, not without my horse reacting to someone diving into the hedge or bolting into the brush. If anyone had run, I would have seen them. There was just nothing. Still pretty out of it, I led the idiot beast into the yard, untacked him, and went through the motions on autopilot. When I went inside, the house was empty. I went straight to the bathroom to check myself in the mirror. The blood from my nose had been wiped away. Not completely. There were faint smears, like someone had carefully cleaned it up. The cut on my forehead was still there though, leaving a dent that I can still feel even now. I ended up going to A&E later once my family got home. The doctor listened while I explained what happened, minus the voice, and then said something that stuck with me ever since. "You're very lucky you managed to get yourself home like that. Some people would be thanking whoever was looking out for them." Later on, my sister reminded me of something I'd said years earlier after waking from a coma, that I'd had a strange dream while riding, and I clearly remembered hearing a man's voice. The more I think about it, the less I can explain any of it. Maybe an accident-prone, adrenaline junkie idiot like me really does need someone watching over her. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.